What if the message you've been waiting for wasn't delayed? What if it was already written, already sealed, already moving through the invisible corridors between two hearts that were never really separate to begin with? What if, at this very moment, someone whose soul has been quietly intertwined with yours for longer than either of you can name finally discovered the truth you've carried in your heart all along, not through rumor, not through inference, not through the distorted lens of a second-hand story, but through the pure and undeniable weight of the real thing? The truth, your truth, the feelings you tried to fold small enough to hide in the ordinary spaces of your days, tucked beneath conversations about nothing, masked by laughter that came a half-second too quickly, disguised as casual interest when everything in you was anything but casual. The love you whispered only to yourself in the quiet hours when no one was watching, when the world had gone dark and still and there was nothing left to perform for. The hope you kept alive with both hands even when doubt arrived like an uninvited guest and sat down at your table and told you to be reasonable, to be practical, to let it go. You didn't let it go. You held it closer. And that, more than anything, is what changed everything. Because somewhere beyond the noise of ordinary life, beyond the crowded schedules and the endless obligations and the thousand small distractions that train people to look everywhere except at what truly matters, something shifted. A moment arrived, quiet and sudden and absolute, in which your soulmate finally understood. Not partially. Not in the vague way we sometimes understand things we're not quite ready to receive. Completely. Fully. The way understanding arrives when we stop resisting it and simply let it land. They saw what had been there all along. Every silent wish you carried. Every unspoken prayer you sent out into the dark without knowing whether anyone received it. Every single time your heart reached toward theirs across whatever distance stood between you, miles or months, or the particular kind of silence that can grow between two people who feel too much and say too little. They saw all of it, and seeing it, truly seeing it for the first time, struck them the way lightning strikes, sudden, clarifying, impossible to ignore. In the aftermath of that moment, the landscape of their life rearranged itself. The things they had been telling themselves were important revealed themselves to be what they always were: distractions, comfortable fictions, reasonable sounding reasons to wait, to hesitate, to stay exactly where they were instead of moving toward the thing that had been calling to them all along. The plans fell away. The excuses dissolved. The fears, which had seemed so solid and so reasonable, turned out to be made of something much less permanent than they appeared. One by one, the delays released their hold. Because when a soul finally recognizes its counterpart, when the recognition is full and unambiguous and arrives with the weight of something that has always been true, hesitation becomes not just unnecessary but impossible. The body knows before the mind admits it. The heart decides before the logic catches up. And so they left everything behind. Not recklessly, not blindly, but with the kind of clarity that only comes when you finally understand what you cannot afford to lose. Because the question was never what they were leaving. The question was always what they were moving toward. And the answer to that question, arriving in them now with the force of something long delayed, was unmistakable. You. If they could speak to you in this very moment, perhaps the words would come haltingly at first, because some truths are too large for language to carry cleanly. Perhaps they would say, "I didn't realize how deeply you felt. I caught fragments of it, hints and glimpses, moments that made something in me pause and pay attention, but I never let myself look at the whole picture. I kept the lens deliberately narrow because something in me understood that if I saw it fully, I wouldn't be able to pretend anymore. And I wasn't ready to stop pretending. But now I've seen it. And now I cannot pretend any longer. And the strange thing, the thing that surprises me most, is that I don't want to. Because knowledge changes everything. Once your soulmate understood the depth of your feelings, they were no longer able to treat their own as something theoretical, something distant, something to examine from a safe remove. The connection they had always felt but never fully named pressed itself forward and demanded acknowledgement. The pull that had followed them through days and seasons and ordinary moments suddenly had context, had meaning, had a name. The strange and persistent familiarity, the feeling that every path led back to you, that conversations with you had a different texture than conversations with anyone else, that something about your presence settled something restless in them, all of it resolved, suddenly and completely, into recognition. Maybe they had tried to rationalize it before. Maybe they told themselves it was coincidence or chemistry or simply the comfort of familiarity. Maybe they convinced themselves there was time, that they could keep things as they were a little longer, keep the uncertainty in place, wait for some perfect and clearly signaled moment when everything aligned. But learning the truth about your heart removed that option. The wall they built, stone by careful stone, to contain their own emotions began to crumble from the inside. And behind it, untouched by all that effort at containment, was something that had been alive the whole time. The same longing you carried, the same hope, the same love, patient and persistent, waiting for the wall to come down. Picture them in the moment of realization, standing absolutely still while the world continued its relentless movement around them. Traffic and noise and the churn of ordinary time, and none of it penetrating, none of it reaching them, because everything happening inside them was so much louder than anything happening around them. Only one thought, a thought shaped like your name, a thought that replayed every memory of you with new understanding, like watching a film a second time and suddenly seeing all the things you missed because you didn't yet know what to look for. Conversations that seemed casual now revealed the care woven through every word. Smiles that lingered a beat longer than necessary. Moments when your eyes said things that your voice had the sense to leave alone. Small gestures of loyalty that you probably never thought anyone noticed, because you offered them without expectation, because that was simply who you were. The way you showed up, the way you stayed. The way being near you felt like arriving somewhere, like the particular relief of being home after a long journey you hadn't known you were tired from. Now they understood. Now every piece arranged itself into the picture it had always been forming. And once seen, it could not be unseen. The only direction left was forward. Not tomorrow. Not someday when the timing was better or the circumstances were easier or the fear had faded enough to make movement feel safe. Now, because some truths don't ask for patience. They require action. They require the willingness to set down the comfortable weight of indecision and walk, and then, because walking isn't fast enough, to run. Your soulmate left behind the overthinking that had kept them circling the same question without ever landing. They left behind the what-ifs that had served as a kind of emotional paralysis dressed up as wisdom. They stopped asking whether they should, whether it was practical, whether the moment was precisely, ideally, impeccably perfect. Love has never waited for perfect timing. Love has never needed it. Love arrives in the middle of imperfection and transforms the conditions it finds, because the conditions were never the point. The connection was always the point. So they started moving toward you, closer with every step, closer with every heartbeat, fueled by a singular and overwhelming thought that had collapsed all their uncertainty into something simple and irresistible. I need to see them. I need them to know. As they move closer, their heart speaks truths they had kept quiet for too long. Truths that had been patient with them even when patience was harder than speaking. They think about the specific and irreplaceable things that belong only to you, the texture of your laugh, the particular quality of warmth you carry, the way your energy changes a room in ways so subtle that people feel it without being able to name it. They think about the inexplicable peace that settles over them whenever they imagine a future with you in it, a peace so distinct and familiar that its absence, when they imagine the alternative, feels like a kind of grief. You were never just a chapter in their story. You were never a passing possibility they could have chosen and then moved on from without consequence. You were the quiet thread running through more moments than they had realized, the constant they had been referencing without knowing it, the missing piece whose shape they had always sensed without ever being able to describe. Their heart had known before their mind caught up. Their soul had recognized yours long before their conscious self was willing to admit it. And now they running toward that recognition, running toward you. Meanwhile, you may be sitting quietly in your uncertainty, still wondering, still turning over the same questions in the way we do when we care deeply and have no clear answers, still listening to the silence between messages and trying to read what it means, still asking yourself whether any of it was real, whether your feelings were visible, whether the connection you felt was reciprocal or only a story you told yourself. This is the cruelest part of loving someone, the not knowing, the waiting, the way hope and doubt trade places so rapidly that you can barely tell them apart. But what if your feelings had already traveled farther than you knew? What if every genuine emotion you carried sent ripples outward into the space between you, ripples that traveled through silence and survived distance and arrived, quietly and certainly, at their destination? What if the heart's most honest communications don't require words? What if yours had already been received? Genuine feeling has a way of finding its destination. It moves through channels that logic hasn't mapped and arrives in ways that reason can't predict. The love you protected even when doubt told you it was foolish, the hope you maintained even when everything external seemed to argue against it, these things were not wasted. They were not sent into a void. They reached someone. They reached the specific person they were always meant to reach. And that person felt them, in the way we feel things that are true before we can explain why they true. They feel it now, completely and without reservation. Not vaguely, not partially, not filtered through the protective distance of uncertainty, but fully, the way we feel things when we stop managing our response to them and simply let ourselves be moved. They feel grateful for your honesty, moved by your courage, in awe of the fact that you carried what you carried with such care and such steadiness. In a world where people routinely guard themselves behind irony and deflection and the studied performance of not caring too much, your feelings were real. And real things, genuinely real things, have a power that carefully managed impressions never achieve. They're closer now. Every step forward is also a step away from the version of themselves that held back, that waited, that kept the distance in place as a form of protection against the vulnerability of being fully known and fully choosing. That version is receding. What's replacing it is something simpler and more honest, someone moving toward the person they love with the whole of themselves, without reservation, without the armor of uncertainty. They don't need perfect words for this moment. They stopped preparing a speech. They stopped rehearsing what they say and how they say it and what they do if the words come out wrong. Because some connections are understood before a single sentence is constructed. Some recognition happens at a level beneath language, in the space where souls communicate in ways that don't translate but don't need to. They say what they feel. And what they feel will be enough, because it's true. And then the moment arrives. The moment that every other moment was quietly pointing toward. They there, standing before you. Perhaps there's a breath of silence first, because some things ask to be held for just a moment before they spoken. Perhaps neither of you speaks right away and neither of you needs to, because the look between you carries everything that words would only approximate. And then, I know how you feel. I know what you've been carrying, and I know how long you've carried it, and I need you to know that knowing it has changed everything. I left what I was holding onto because it turned out to be lighter than what I was moving toward. I couldn't stay where I was once I understood. I couldn't keep living as though this wasn't the most important thing, because it is. You are. Whatever we've been circling, whatever we've been approaching without naming, I am naming it now. I am here. I came because every direction I tried to go and led back to you, and eventually I stopped fighting the direction and simply followed it. In that moment, the universe seems to hold its breath. Not because the story is finished, but because the story is finally, truly beginning. Not the tentative beginning of two people who haven't yet admitted what they are to each other, but the real beginning, clear-eyed and chosen and built on the foundation of something that was already, quietly, always true. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. It wasn't the clean and uncomplicated love story that requires no courage. It asked for patience. It asked for the willingness to keep hoping through long stretches of uncertainty. It asked you to hold on to something real even when nothing around you confirmed that you should. But real things endure. Real feelings survive the long seasons of doubt. Real connections have a way of finding each other regardless of the detours, regardless of the distance, regardless of how many times the path seemed to dead end. Your soulmate found out your true feelings. They left everything behind. They rushed toward you, not because fate compelled them and not because destiny removed the choice, but because love, when it is genuine and fully seen, becomes its own compulsion. The truth in your heart awakened the truth in theirs. And once two souls recognize each other with that kind of completeness, there is only one direction remaining. Forward. Together. At last. And everything else, the waiting, the doubt, the long and uncertain middle of the story, falls away, not forgotten, but transformed into exactly what it was, the road that led here.